My name is Jack Hart. I lead the Brewer Morris tax team here in the US. I've been doing this for just shy of a decade now. So hopefully I know what I'm talking about when it comes to tax recruitment in the US and have managed and helped people in their careers multiple times. Got a team of 30 that focus in tax. So well positioned to assist either hiring or looking for a role. I'm going to go ladies first, Dave, if that's okay.
Sure.
Tiffany, if you could give us kind of an introduction and a background, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Tiffany Michelli. I am the Vice President of Tax for Dave & Buster's, and I got my start in the casino gaming industry, so not the video game industry, but I'm born and raised in Las Vegas, actually, and a lot of time at Deloitte. I've been out of Big Four for about 6 years, actually, this month. And then out of Big Four, spent some roles with casino operators, technology, and eventually found my way to Dave and Buster's and made the move to Texas. And I focus in my role in managing all things tax, and it's a great company. It's very family friendly. My three children absolutely love that I work for Dave and Buster's, and it's there's a lot of exciting opportunities that that I'm able to be a part of. And I'm happy to join this webinar as well and be able to provide any guidance as you all are looking for transitioning or expanding your career, and happy to provide insight.
Yeah, it's a very cool business to be working for right now. I'm not surprised that the kids are over the moon.
Right, exactly.
Thank you for that, Tiffany. Kelly?
I'm Kelly Pruitt. I've got about over 25 years of tax experience, everything from head of tax, started in public accounting, showing my age here at Anderson, and did that for a bit, and then have moved on, worked through some very challenging companies that have never had tax services. Currently kind of took a step back for some family issues, but doing some consulting work, just trying to stay engaged in the field right now. So yeah, I'm in Atlanta. I've been here for 25 years. So
yeah, not traveled around like Tiffany has done thus far. But thank you, Kelly. Dave, same question.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Sekula. I'm the CEO of Global Tax Management. Closing in on 30 years of my career in tax and finance. I started out in public accounting, a couple different areas, technology on the financial accounting side, auditing, and then ultimately in the tax. Spent about 8 years in corporate with companies domiciled in the UK, a company called Smiths Group, and then GlaxoSmithKline on the pharmaceutical side. And then in 2006, I had a pretty strong background in GAAP accounting, in particularly ASC 740, and with Enron, it created an opportunity where the market wasn't really prepared for the precision that was going to be enforced in the new SEC audit world with ASC 740. So I jumped over to a consulting firm, Global Tax Management, where I focused on ASC 740, the tax technologies. In particular, at the time, it was TaxStream and OneSource Tax Revision today. And grew through the organization. We're a tax consulting firm, mainly focused on the upper middle market, large market. And so we get to see a lot of client experiences that I think will be helpful for today's conversation.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads, your career kind of leads quite nicely into the first question in terms of when to pivot. If you're focused on direct, indirect, international, high net worth, audit, whatever it may be, when/is there a good time to really hone in and focus or vice versa? When is a good time to kind of branch out and be more generalists? What are your views on that?
Yeah, the first thing I would just advise everybody, to the extent that it's possible, I would be a continuous student. So expose yourself, even if like you're, looking to focus, I would get to know your peers in your department and your company and continue to learn what's important to them and how you can bring value. But what I would say in general is using my own experience, when Enron occurred, and again, seeing that the precision of tax accounting was going to change and get very, disciplined and probably punitive if you didn't have that precision, created an opportunity where you could see the market changing, where, it wasn't just the opportunity within your organization, but the market in general, that, you could see the longevity of a topic that could move you forward. So if you think about it in the current world, there's a lot of changes to the international tax space. We had TCJA come in, we have Pillar Two. Some of those things have led to changes that will occur with 987, 905C. The one thing I would advise everybody, though, no matter what, if you decide to specialize, I would try to think of everything as circular. How does your area impact the next area, so that if you focus on international, how does GILTI impact the tax provision? How does it impact valuation allowance with FTCs, things like that, so that you can create more value and also close the loop on your piece. If your piece is going to have fluctuation, how does it affect the next person's role, so you can control that?
Yeah, yeah. So it's about being, from that last point. It's about being kind of a good citizen almost in the tax team, and helping out your peers, and hopefully that obviously transitions across to them helping you as well. Tiffany, same question.
Sure. Sure, absolutely. So, me coming from public, I, had a deep tax technical experience with direct tax. So, all things direct tax, provision, compliance, tax credits, things like that. Now, as you make a move to industry, if you're looking for a head of tax role, or eventually that's something that interests you, it is very important that you have, at first you're very specialized and in a deep technical knowledge on, one item. So one aspect of tax is very important. But then as you move up to, a head of tax, or, maybe a director role, it is very important, like Dave is saying, that you need to be able to understand how your expertise is impacting the other areas of tax, and you need to start learning about the other areas of tax. I had to learn a lot about indirect tax, when I stepped out from Deloitte. And like Dave said, continuous student. There's so much to learn. All the research, you have to be able to have the desire to expand and to hone in on your skills and expand your knowledge, and that's what it takes. And then you will be able to get to that next level, but knowledge is definitely key.
Yeah, that kind of touches on a topic we briefly discussed last year, actually, with Patrick and Joe, on picking mentors, and picking mentor, not just one, but picking multiple mentors. So if you're in the direct tax side of things, pick a mentor in indirect, picking a mentor in international, and have that capability to go and ask people questions to broaden your kind of skill set and your knowledge of broader tax. Do you think that's
Right.
Have you had mentors going through as you've kind of had to diversify?
I definitely have, and that is a very, very important key to success, and also sponsorship as well. So having a mentor to be able to, just spitball with, right, on ideas, and get additional knowledge, and all of that, that's very key. And then also finding a sponsor, so someone that is going to have your back, someone that is going to bring you up in conversations with strategic leaders, and that's very important as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Kelly, same question. What's
Well,
your thoughts?
and to combine what Dave and Tiffany said, be a student and expand. I came up in the direct tax side also, public accounting and everything. My first industry job did not have hardly any indirect tax because we were a wholesaler. So we didn't, and this was, a while back before Wayfair and everything. But I had the opportunity to have a great sponsor and mentor who grew up in the indirect tax side, that I was the number 2 in his department, and learned a lot on indirect. And so my next position allowed me to run all of it. So that point of always being open to things and being the first to raise your hand, it's very interesting, at least on this consulting side. I'm seeing a lot of need for the indirect tax side. There's tons of people out there with the direct tax experience, but the indirect tax, there seems to be a stigma that a lot of people don't prefer that, I guess is the good way to put it. But it's needed, to Tiffany's point, and that's something that is out there, and a lot of people coming straight out of public don't have that experience. So just be aware.
I think part of that as well is depending on how you want to progress through your career. Atypically, if you look at the two of you, VP of Taxes, you both come from a direct tax background. That is kind of, there's a bias, or at least there seems to be a bias toward people being a head of tax, moving up through the direct tax side, and to what you've both done, tagging on indirect international. I think that's, I don't want to say part of the problem, but the indirect tax side of things, it feels harder to widen your experience when you're coming from indirect tax. And I think that's something that, one, the market needs to change, and the perception of it from CFOs and the suite needs to change on that, because there are some phenomenal indirect tax people out there that could very easily go and be a head of tax if that's what they want.
Well, and I was going to say, and us as leaders need to look at that also. I mean, direct knowledge of 2 people who grew up on the indirect side and now run tax departments. But, again, as a leader, we need to say, hey, my indirect tax teammate, do you want to expand your knowledge? Do you want to, get into the tax technical side? Because I think also a lot of it is a lot of indirect people don't necessarily go through the education and the rigorness of public accounting.
Yeah.
Lack of better terms. So that's not typically a requirement. But to your point, that doesn't necessarily preclude them from being a good leader.
No, not at all. Not at all. I've seen, just a quick point, I've seen a couple of questions pop up. We'll address the questions in the last kind of 5-10 minutes, depending on how many we kind of have left. This is a huge kind of, not just in tax, but a huge topic more broadly now in terms of AI and the adoption of it and the automation of it when it comes to just general life. How is that impacting tax, and what should tax professionals now focus on and develop to stay competitive in this kind of AI world? I'm going to come back to you, Kelly, on that one. Firstly, what are your thoughts?
Don't be scared of it. I think a lot of coworkers have been very hesitant to adopt the co-pilots and chat GPT and that kind of thing. And it's interesting. I have older teenagers. I have one in college. And I mean, the amount of stuff that he puts through it and how it spits it out is just mind-boggling to me. So, and it's a tool. I mean, it's a tool like OneSource. It's a tool like, any software. You have to embrace it and not be scared of it. Because like I said, I feel like there's a lot of trepidation out there that, it's going to replace our jobs. But I think there have been so many studies that have found the errors that, it's only a 2% error rate. Well, do you want to be that 2%? Do you want your client to be that 2%? So, I don't think it's going to replace tax professionals, but I think it definitely can assist us. So just embrace it, learn how to use it. Don't don't be scared of it. Don't shy away from it. I mean, there was something the other day, and my son's like, just pop it into Chat GPT, Mom, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And sure enough, it was fabulous. But I think that's something that, as tax professionals, people entering the workforce are a lot more open to it and willing to use it. And I think that those of us at my Tiffany and Dave's level need to be aware of, and embrace it just as much as the first year staff accountant that's sitting there. So
Yeah, good point. Tiffany, are you embracing AI at Dave and Buster's?
So I am. I use ChatGPT, I would say a few times a day, honestly. And I use it a lot of times as prompts for if I'm going to write a letter to, maybe it's an auditor or it's to resolve something. A lot of times I'll use ChatGPT. I'll put down the topics that I want to say, and then it will help me prompt in a letter, and I find that very helpful. um, I don't I don't trust it very much for research in tax technical. Sometimes you can put something in and it will not give you the correct answer at all, but you can have sources, and then you can dig in and you can go to those sources, and then you can find the right answer. I don't recommend it for tax research. Definitely still use your BNA, your CCH, but I find it very helpful with writing letters and getting prompts. So very much use it.
Okay, great. Dave, same for GTM, embracing it?
Yeah, so I agree with Kelly and Tiffany. Certainly using it, certainly embracing it. One of the things I would recommend is it is here to stay. What form it takes, and how much it becomes of our daily operational life will probably increase. My advice to everybody is similar to what was said earlier: embrace it, don't avoid it, and start to think about like what kind of skill sets as you're looking out to hire. Just like a company will look at tax technology as a whole. Do people know Alteryx? Do they know certain platforms? I would say the AI knowledge is there. My warning to everybody is, I would not rely on it. Make sure you still are doing the research. Make sure you still understand what the research is telling you, and leverage it like any other tool. But I do think it's here to stay, and we'll have a pretty solid place in the tax department. And we do use it. We use a number of different platforms. One of the things I think you're going to see in the AI space is what they call ecosystems. It's where, like, ChatGPT is going to be talking to five other AI tools and come back with the best result. But we're seeing in some of the we'll call it the R&D areas of AI, are the ecosystem concept, where multiple tools are gathering data.
Okay, that's interesting. I've not heard of what did you call it? Ego?
Ecosystems, it just means
Ego.
that, like, multiple tools will start
Right.
collaborating, if that makes sense.
Okay.
If Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. I obviously know what an ecosystem is, but I didn't realize that was even involved in the AI side of things. So that's interesting. Kind of circling slightly back to the first question here for you, Tiffany, in terms of making that transition from more of a compliance role into more of a strategic advisory position. Now, that kind of naturally happens as you rise through the ranks and become more experienced and go up the ladder. Any recommendations on how to successfully manage that shift and how to navigate it?
Yes, yes. So you're right. That is just, it's a natural shift. So kind of everybody starts in a compliance role, right? You need to learn that deep technical knowledge that comes from, understanding tax compliance. But then in order to move up in any tax role, you really have to change the way you think. So it's not just, preparing a tax return, but starting to think strategically And in order to start thinking strategically, like if you're in industry, you need to learn your business. You need to learn your company. The way you do this is you talk with other departments. You gain knowledge. Maybe you find out that you're expanding in a certain area. Well, take that knowledge. Okay, let's look and see. Maybe there's some incentives if we expand to this city or whatever, or, but the way that you learn that and the way that you become a strategic thinker is by expanding your relationships within your business and learning about your business, and then being able to take that knowledge and then start to apply it. So you could, come up with, potentially there's a tax credit that is available that maybe no one else really realized because they weren't talking to the head of, maybe at Dave and Buster's, for instance, head of, food development or game development. And then when you start to gather that information and, share it with your superiors, you start to become kind of a go-to person and start to get a reputation around the business that, oh, well, Tiffany talked to me about this, and she said that we could do this, and this would be an incentive or whatever, and you just start to become known. And it helps you kind of build your reputation. And from there you will start to eventually start to move up, but it really starts with expansion of your knowledge, understanding of your business, and just an overall change of your mindset to more strategic, and the promotions will come.
Yeah, I think that what you mentioned in terms of the broader relationships kind of ties into a question later on, in terms of the hybrid kind of stuff that we'll kind of finish on. Dave, same question for you coming from your side.
I agree 100%. One of the things that you can get trapped in with compliance is like, the term they use is Sally, same as last year, where you just start picking things up and putting on a return because they come through, a GL account, or you just follow how it was done last year. Learning that deep technical knowledge, and more importantly, like what like levers and influencers you can do to maybe mitigate or accelerate, or whatever the issue may be, through that deep technical knowledge is really key. I think it's also when you're in compliance, it probably is a good thing to understand as to, like, goals of the organization that are outside the compliance process. Is your company more ETR driven? Is it more cash management driven? And how do the things that are in compliance, which generate the cash, or have, a trickle down effect on, return to provision, how do they impact the organization? So, the other thing I would just advise people is, like, in compliance, you get to see a lot of things. Think about, the times when you can ask questions, if it's a reorg and you see your first step plan and you just see boxes and lines and everything else. I wouldn't necessarily advise asking those questions in the meeting as to what does this all mean, but I would definitely see if you can do it offline, and that will probably greatly expand, your technical knowledge as to how compliance flows into the greater good of the organization.
Yeah, no, that I think pulling people aside and picking people's brains, especially as you're kind of rising up through the ranks, is always going to be key. Kelly, I'm going to slightly adapt the question for you, if that's okay. I'm going to throw a little curveball at you. The last 6, 8, 12 months, I've been speaking with a lot of CFOs, senior leadership, where the head of is kind of stuck just doing the compliance and then isn't adding the value, so they're not driving any value add through tax. How do you not get stuck in that, just for people kind of coming up through either your first role or you've been in a role for 5-10 years? How do you not get stuck just doing the compliance?
Well, I think it also goes back, Tiffany mentioned earlier, sponsorship, and the broad technical knowledge kind of lays the groundwork, so people know, oh, this individual knows what they're talking about. They have the tax knowledge, but if your name is brought up in a conversation from a strategic standpoint of, wait a minute, we need to get tax on the front end of this and rather than the back end. I mean, how many deals have happened and tax is the last to know than when something has happened? And,
Everyone.
well, and the opportunities missed from that, there's just the opportunity cost. So from a strategic standpoint, entity rationalization, look at this, and going back to what Tiffany was saying, those relationships of, you have to have the relationships to know what the company's goals are. Are we looking to integrate? Do we want to keep this division separate? Why do we want to keep this division separate? So from that strategic standpoint, yeah, you have the compliance and you're ready to pull your hair out because you're doing, duplicate returns and trying to get everything done. But there's a reason, maybe we want to keep this separate. So that goes into Dave's point of finding the goals of the organization and everything. So I think it goes with, you have to have that exposure in order to not get pigeonholed and, oh, they only do tax returns.
And is that more, I mean, by the sound of things, that's more on the person rather than the organization to almost go out their way to figure that out? Is that
Well, yeah,
fair
yeah,
to
well,
say?
and I think that's a lot of it. I've always been told it's so much louder when someone else toots your horn as opposed to you saying, "Hey, look what I did." But at the same time, you have to advocate for yourself
Yeah,
and back up with what you're representing from a strategy standpoint.
yeah, that makes sense. Dave, this is you've kind of done it, I don't want to say backwards in terms of your career in-house, CPA in-house back to a CPA firm. We get asked this question all the time when people kind of are in-house and want to progress their career but are stuck at a certain level and there's no room for step up in that business. I mean, the obvious answer is to call me or one of my team, but is there another, like, what would your advice be for someone who's in that? And we see what you've done in the UK and Europe all the time, happens constantly. Is that a path that should be more well trodden, do you feel?
You mean as far as
Going
maybe
in-house to CPA.
yeah,
So kind of the opposite way of what people think it is.
yeah, I would say there's two ways to look at it. If you were in a company, let's say you're in a company you like, but there's again not the upside. The first thing that I would suggest is trying to expand your relationships within the organization. Maybe jump on projects that are not necessarily tax oriented, and really get to know and broaden your knowledge within the organization. So, for argument's sake, if it's an ERP implementation, there's always project aspects that either someone doesn't want to do or isn't selected or asked to do. You can volunteer and get a broader adaptability within the organization, also broaden your tax and technical background. When you're going from out from in-house to back to the CPA world, one of the best parts about it is, how you feel as a subject matter expert and, your ability to feel confident that you can take that and solve someone else's problem. When you deal with a problem as an in-house provider, and you solve it, chances are most companies, if not every company, is probably dealing with the same issue, trying to figure it out. So it is a great stepping stone if you have, that level of core competency to move back into the consulting world, and really drive a lot of those relationships. But again, on the flip side, I think you can also navigate within an organization and go from maybe a quasi tax person to a quasi finance tax person, and really build out through the organization. So
Thank you. Kelly, same question. How would you go back 15 years now? How would you push your career and change it
well, and I mean, same thing. It's the relationships. I was the number two at a company, and I knew I was never going to be the number one. That individual's still there, but it gave me the opportunity to learn other aspects. I mean, going back to, the first question of when to pivot, that you learn not just direct tax, but indirect tax. You learn not just sales and use, but oh, wait, property tax stuff too. So, to get that broad base. And to Dave's point, the visibility on the outside projects, the ERP implementations. I've worked at companies that have had leadership programs where they would, pick a cohort of 10 or 15 individuals for over the course of a year, to develop. And that came from those individuals saying, hey, I want to do more, but there's not really more that I can do. So I think also as a leader in a company, we need to be an advocate to keep talent, to keep good talent. Is you've got to keep them, everyone challenged. So you want to broaden their base and expand their knowledge on subjects, but at the same time, keep everyone happy, for lack of better terms. Just because you want to keep that talent around, you've invested in people, and so yeah,
Yeah, I
the
agree.
technical part, you have to have the technical part, but at the same time, there's also the relationship part, and you learn things, and then who knows? I mean, in today's world, companies get bought and sold all the time. That broad experience that you had on that weird project that you got stuck on may pay in spades down the line.
Yeah, I think I was reading something the other day, and it was talking around the retention of talent, and it was kind of talking around it outside of cash, because if someone is a tax manager and gets offered a job paying 50, 60,000 more, just from personal circumstances, the likelihood is they're going to take that job. But outside of the cash kind of element of it, it's the appreciation that is lacking from a lot of people. Just saying, thank you, I appreciate you, and giving people the responsibility to do more is something that's lacking at a lot of places, which is why we see a lot of the turnover and people leaving roles, especially at the junior levels, just purely due to lack of praise and lack of people saying thank you. No, I really don't like my boss. Why? Well, he never says thank you. He never says good job. I never get my appraisal. Like, all these sort of things that people see as menial are so key for retention as a manager. Tiffany, I may have just stolen part of your thunder on that one. I'm not quite sure, because I don't know what your answer is to the question. But your thoughts on, how do you progress your career if you feel stuck?
Yeah. Well, and I will kind of talk a little bit about, I do think that it is important, as Kelly has said, that you do need to expand your relationships. So you need to expand your relationships among other departments. You need to make sure that your skip level understands your value, understands what you bring to the table. And but to be honest, you may be in a certain position where you really won't get to that next level. I've been in that type of position as well. And then in that type of situation, you need to consult with some mentors, some sponsorships that have your best interest in mind. And what I mean by that is that it might be the best time to leave. It might be the best time to start looking for another position that will allow you to achieve the level that you want to achieve. And it's really important. Your best advocate is yourself, and you really do need to watch out for yourself. And so, while all of these things are definitely very important, there also is a time that you should recognize that if it's time to leave, get good advice, and definitely do start looking.
Yeah, and I think, again, we touched on it kind of last year. I think it's an unspoken kind of topic that it's okay to sit at a level. It's okay to be a phenomenal tax manager, a phenomenal senior tax manager, and get paid really well and not be the number one it was, we kind of spoke on it in depth last year. But I'm a huge advocate of a LIFA tax manager. LIFA tax senior manager is so wildly underrated and undervalued in the job market, because you can rely on them to do a damn good job for what the level that they're at. And I personally, I think that's absolutely fine in any stretch of life. If you find a level that you are comfortable with, it's okay to stay there. And I want to advocate this and I'll bang this drum for forever, because I just think it's a topic that's never discussed. Everyone's always like, oh, you have to be the number one, you have to be the number one, you have to be the number one. It's okay not to be. If you're a tax manager, if you're a tax senior manager, you're going to get paid anywhere from 130 to 170 on the base, depending where you are, plus a bonus. That's a really well paid job. Like, it's okay to stay there. And I think that is kind of ties into that as well. Dave, I think you're also kind of well placed to talk about this next point, is when is the best time to move out of CPA / is there a best time to move out of CPA? Now, hopefully your whole business is not watching this and there's a mass exodus.
That's why I say that now, Blake. Now, I would say in general, one of the things, there's probably two times where I see commonality of why people leave. The first one is, one of the tough things in the public accounting world is if you're in a high turnover environment, unfortunately, the work still has to get done, and sometimes it falls to every level. So if you're someone that's trying to progress in your career, but you're sort of getting stuck in we'll say maybe the work that's not, at the appropriate level for you to be producing, but it just has to get completed, and one way or another, it gets kind of layered on into your other responsibilities. That might be a time where you start to look and say, hey, how long is this going to happen? How many times is this going to happen? And is there really light at the end of the tunnel? The other one is, in the CPA world, sometimes things are out of your control. So you could have like an office in a city where, maybe major clients get acquired, and that revenue, gets depleted from the opportunities to grow within the organization, even if it's temporary. And that might be also another time where you might say, maybe, it's better to now progress within in-house. The one thing I'll tell you between CPAs and in-house organizations, with the right in-house organization, and I would say the same thing with the right, CPA firm, you see everything and you grow relatively fast. I do think in an in-house organization, you probably have more opportunity to do that quicker. Just because usually, they're running leaner than maybe they want to or should. But depending on the organization will determine. But I think those are probably some of the key areas of when I see people, I might advise, hey, now it's time to make a change.
I think also you kind of touched on the progression side of things. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but it feels like in public accounting and CPA, it's kind of you move up. There's a ladder, there's a step ladder there, right? You do this, you get to the next level, you move up, and we're kind of talking around progression. In-house, generally, unless you kind of luck out, you have to move around more to if you want to drive and push through. Tiffany, Kelly, they've both moved around, both progressed within different businesses, but had to move to get to that next level. If you're in the right firm, you kind of don't have to. you can progress up through from tax analyst all the way up to partner if you do things correctly. So there are pros and cons to both, just to kind of play both sides of the question. Kelly, what are your views on this? Because obviously you've made the transition as well.
I think a lot of it also has to do with your life goals. Do you want to be a partner in a CPA firm? Well, if you do, you're not going to necessarily spin out to industry after 3, 4, 5 years. Is your goal to be the lifer tax manager, lifer senior manager? that has, to your point, that has benefits. Your work-life balance, is tons better. You're not having to fly around and leave your family and that, um, you know, have those requirements on yourself in order to do your job well, for lack of better terms. So I think, you need to look at your life goals of, okay, I want to be number one in tax. So I've got my good, strong foundational base in a CPA firm. To Dave's point, you start with that really good technical side. And then, hey, here's an opportunity in industry that I think I can leverage what I know and expand in order to get to my goal in life. Now, goals change because life happens, because hey, you're in industry in 4 years and suddenly your company gets bought. Well, do you go back to the CPA firm or do you just stay in industry? And it's interesting, Dave pointed out that the rapid progression in industry, whereas I've always sort of heard the stigma of, if you're in industry you get very stagnant, whereas in a CPA firm you tend to stay sharper. So that was an interesting perspective, Dave. I had not thought about the fact you're exposed to so many different things in industry as opposed to a CPA firm is keeps you sharp. So
Yeah, there's for sure differences there, and I think a lot of that depends on, to Dave's point as well, the size of the team. If you're going into Coke Industries, who have hundreds of tax professionals in the group, and Amazon, you're not exposed to as much as you would be in a 5-person team. So I think there's things to think around there in terms of the size of team that you're going into, and we touched on it earlier in terms of mentors and stuff like that. Who is your head of tax going to be? Who's your manager going to be? Are they going to advocate for you? Are they going to try and broaden it? All those sort of things that come with it. Tiffany, same question in terms of when's the best time to make a move?
Sure, sure. So, it has also a lot to do with your individual personality and what you like. So, for me, for instance, I loved public accounting for the opportunity of a variety of different clients, different industries, different tax issues, just always something new, always a way to learn and grow, and feels like endless opportunities. Well, taking that same personality that I have, and going to industry, it's very different. So, if you have that, kind of drive still, you have to find the right business, the right industry to go to. Otherwise, you can get bored. So, so for me, I have taken 3 different roles since leaving public, and one of them I became very bored very quickly and had to move on. And it really is very dependent on what you like. It is your career, and it's really important not to just simply go by emotions, but really understand what drives you, and that is how you will be happy and successful and grow. But you really do need to look at that first, I think, before making a move.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's got to come from you, and you've got to enjoy what you're going to do. Whenever we're speaking to anyone around, we're working with, I'm not going to name names, but we're working with X amount of businesses. Is it an industry you're interested in? Like, is it a company that some of the times people haven't heard of the business? Kelly, we spoke to you about something a couple of weeks ago, and it was a business that you were really interested in. Like, if you're really interested in companies and really interested in those sort of businesses, you're going to have more of a drive, and you're going to want to do more. And it kind of touches on previous points as well. If you're interested, you're going to want to know more about the business. You want to connect with more people within the organization, and it all kind of, I think, comes together better if it's a company or an industry or something you're genuinely really passionate about. There's a lady who I'm pretty sure she's just moved to Miami. But I was speaking to her a couple of years ago, and she's like, "I'll only work in the fashion industry." Just didn't want to know about anything else outside of fashion. If it wasn't in the fashion industry, I don't want to hear it, Jack. It's like, okay, it's fair enough. It's what she's really passionate about, and I think that a lot goes to say for that, for sure. We've got 15 minutes left, so I'm going to skip one of the questions, just for time wise. And I'm going to come back to you, Tiffany, on one of the key skill sets that are in demand in the tax market right now. I'm going to expand it a little bit more and say, where do you think it will be in a year or two's time?
Yes, yes. So right now, there is a lot of uncertainty in tax. And, in my role, I receive questions all the time that what if we did this? What would be the tax impact? And all of this, uncertainty and questions that, the board has, your C-suite has. Well, in order to be able to provide them the information, you need to be very competent in being able to do scenario planning, in using tax technology to, run a scenario where, okay, say we have an increase of 5% in sales. What is going to be the impact? And, you have to consider 163J limitation, all of these other things, right? In order to be able to give the cash tax impact. That's something that I see is definitely very hot topic right now. I don't see that going away. I feel like, as we figure out what's going to happen with US tax in maybe the next 6, 7 months, then we're all going to be kind of scrambling. And so I think we need to be in front of that and have tools available, start to think about scenario planning, because it's very impactful. Those are the questions that I get all the time. The other thing is, and then we've talked about this, quite a bit already on the call, but it is very important to develop relationships outside of your department, and that is how you are learning what is important from a tax standpoint, and you can provide advice. You can inform stakeholders on the impacts of maybe an entity rationalization project, or something, anything that comes up. You become that kind of go-to person, and you're able to kind of bridge the gap from other departments operations into tax. And I think that's really important. And the other thing that I would say is very important is tax can be a little bit complicated. And it is really important when you're talking to stakeholders or your CFO that you try to make it as uncomplicated as possible, just because it's a lot to grasp sometimes for a non-tax person. And and if you're able to do that in a good way, you'll know that, you know, maybe your CFO will, mention, "Oh, well, why don't you ask Tiffany about that? She explained this to me and it was, really easy to understand," or whatever. But you become that kind of trusted advisor, and I think that that's a really important skill to have.
Yeah, and not quite. Talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Uh, simplicity,
Sometimes.
but no, no comment to any C-suite level people. Kelly, same question. Skill sets that are in demand.
Well, following up with Tiffany, communication. That's one thing that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, is explain something complicated to a non-tax person. And I feel like sometimes that's 50% of my role, is just explaining why. Um, you know, I don't make the laws, we just follow them, kind of thing. But the communication, but then also the scenario planning, the modeling. You know, everyone learns Excel, everyone learns that, but you also have to have, I think, the confidence to make the assumptions and think through things. So once you have those relationships and, with operations built out, okay, we're going to have a 5% increase in sales, but you know what? We're going to have a related increase in cost of sales. So what's our margin? What that kind of stuff. So going to the scenarios of, okay, well, it's not just going to be a straight 5% increase in sales is going to impact our taxable income because you're going to have all the other complexities built into it. So it's the modeling, it's the AI going, even a step further there. I think that's something that's in demand, negotiating with auditors, because I wouldn't be surprised if in 3 or 4 years, most of the communication you get now from an auditor, a jurisdictional auditor, is AI generated. They pop something into chat GPT or GPT or whatever ecosystem is out there, and that's generating all of the questions for them. So, because
Yeah, it's interesting.
if you think about it, they've already got, some states have databases where they have, hey, if your company has this, you need to look at that kind of thing. So they have their audit manuals already. So it would not be shocking if in 3-5 years they have some kind of AI generator that looks at things for tax audits.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't even not considered that, but it's kind of the way the world's going, isn't it? Dave, going to slightly adapt the question, because Tiffany and Kelly have both touched on the communication side of things, and that's kind of the question that we skipped in lieu of time. How can you improve your communication skills? What would your advice be to people to improve those soft skills?
Yeah, well, right off the bat, the first thing I would do is, if you're a stakeholder, head of tax in an organization, is develop those relationships with your other stakeholders offline. I would not wait for meetings and questions to come up. I would start to try to figure out ways to connect with them, get on the same page, understand what they need, what they're looking for. Um, you know, Kelly raised a great point. Like sometimes in the tax world, you'll get questions where they may not even want the answer. They just want to understand the direction of the answer. Is this going to be a problem? How soon can you get back to me to quantify it? So I think in terms of like building those relationships and then also being concise. My first time in an executive meeting, I wrote a memo that was 1 page. It was literally 1 page long. And the CFO picked it up and he kind of made all these faces with it. And then he ripped it in half and showed me the half of the paper and said, this is how much room you have to explain something to me. And then he ripped it in half again and he said, this is how much room I have to explain to the CEO. And he asked me to rewrite it. So I think, just knowing how to answer that question in common sense language, like Kelly mentioned, and, get to the point really quick in a way that connects with the stakeholder is important.
That makes sense. And that kind of ties, I'm going to stay with you, Dave. I'm going to, in terms of how best to do that. Now, we're obviously seeing I hate mentioning COVID, but post-COVID and the kind of flood back to the office. And we've heard of teams that have been forced back in 5 days a week, and then there's been a mass exodus. It's kind of all over the place, but there does seem to be a push back into more of a hybrid schedule. Does that go hand in hand with the building relationships? And do we feel that's best for everyone?
I think it does. What I would say is experienced tax departments probably it'll work out one way or another. They just have the years of experience, the communication styles, and maybe the way they understand how to share detail and communicate, timely. For people younger in their career, I do think the hybrid work environment is critical. I do think tax in probably every industry is an apprenticeship model. And the more you have access, the more you see someone, the more you're top of mind, the more they share. So you think about like in my career, I don't think I've ever had many, I would say, intimate conversations over Teams. But if I was doing coffee, I might have a VP say, hey, just so you know, there's a merger on the horizon, or something that like, is now like you're feeling a different aspect of the business. You have a different level of communication, and they're speaking to you in the moment, because it's more fluid to do so. But I do think collaboration, especially when you're earlier in your career, works better in that hybrid world. Not to say it doesn't work in the remote world, but there's probably more fluid conversation and ability to, engage.
Yeah, not to, hopefully I'm not misquoting Wayne here, but I've been on a couple of panels with Wayne, the SVP of tax at Visa, and he kind of said that if you want a job, you go remote. If you want a career, you go hybrid. That was very much his steadfast view on it the last time I spoke to him. Yeah, hopefully, I'm assuming that's not changed. But yeah, that was an interesting kind of take, and one that I guess it probably hit home for a lot of people when we were on the panel at that time. Kelly, your thoughts?
Agreed that I think hybrid helps you build those relationships, but I think you also need to be conscious. I've been in an environment here recently where everyone in the city was to go into the office on a specific day of the week, but we would all go in and literally shut our doors because the people that we worked with in other parts of the organization were not in the same city as us. So it was very frustrating from that perspective. However, we made the best of it, for lack of better terms, and we would all block our calendars off and all of us go to lunch together. So at least you do get that organic, and you help build the relationships across the company, because there was someone from FP&A that was there was someone from Treasury there, so you talk with them and you build those relationships. And oh, hey, we're like when Silicon Valley Bank had their challenges a couple of years ago, we were all scrambling. Even tax jumped in and helped out with some stuff. So but it also kind of pushed us to the top of mind, even in the Treasury Department. Hey, we've got these tax people over here that they can handle this stuff. So I think it's here to stay. And it's Dave, Tiffany, and I don't know about you guys, but I started in a world where you were in the office 5,
Right.
6 days, some weeks. So it's very interesting because of COVID how much things changed, and I guess what expectations are. And I think sometimes also because of that, going back to people entering the workforce, their communication skills maybe are not as strong because they haven't had to do that.
Yeah.
They haven't had to be interpersonal, and they would rather message you over Teams as opposed to have that water cooler conversation and everything. So I think it's mentoring as leaders, and as we progress in our career of getting people and learning how to communicate. Again, it all goes back to communication.
Yeah, for sure. Tiffany, your thoughts?
Sure. Definitely agree with all that's been said. And I want to add that, being in office creates opportunities for you. Being present, being available, just like when you're in public accounting, you're young, maybe in a tax partner's looking around, okay, who can I bring to, you know, go meet this new client? You're there, you're available. There's opportunities that arise with being physically present and being, available and having discussions with your peers, with other departments. And, like Dave and Kelly said, it's very different than, being remote, having chats on Teams. It's a different mindset. I do think it's here to stay, and I do think it's for the best. And especially in an environment for tax where you need mentorship to grow, you need sponsorship to grow, it is the way to do it. And I'm fully supportive of it. And I'm glad that in my business we have a hybrid environment that's required, and I think it's helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. We've hit the 1 o'clock. We've got one question, which actually it's an interesting one. Feel free to jump in, whoever wants to. How to start a career as an international tax accountant? What continuing education could you recommend? Don't all jump in at once.
So maybe I can jump in. I don't know the specific fact pattern for the person asking the question. There are things like even GTM, we have like what we call GTI, which is like a training institute for various disciplines of tax. But I would say you got to start somewhere. So if I was internal, I would look at it from the perspective of is there an international tax department, or more importantly, if international means, you know, um, non-domestic international tax issues, then can you start to liaise with the parties that, your peers or, third parties that are providing services. The second thing I would definitely say, it's self-study, right? Whenever you're looking to change careers, you're going to make what it becomes, right? Sometimes we get pushed towards that, but if we are desiring to seek it, I think we have to invest the time in doing that. So I would look at, combination of the webinars that are out there. There's also a lot of industry groups. Some of them cost money, but what you can always do is contact them and tell them your situation and ask how you can engage. So like TEI has a lot of times TEI locally will have an international committee. Some of the organizations have international committees like MAPI, and I'm probably blanking on that right now, but I would try to navigate, the world that you have available to you and begin to create those relationships that can get you to the career place that you want. But it will require self-starting and self-study if it's not part of your organization.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on TEI there briefly. I couldn't recommend them enough. This is actually the first time I've not had a TEI kind of president on the webinar to advocate for it, but it's a great thing to be part of, and just the networking there. You've all talked about networking through this whole kind of hour. That's a phenomenal place to network around some brilliant tax professionals. So if you're not part of the TEI, can't advocate for them enough. You'll randomly see myself and probably Dave pop up there every now and again. But yeah, thank you for that, Dave. And it looks like David has also answered. David Hibbard has also answered that question in the chat as well. So we are slightly over time, so I'm going to finish up now. But thank you very much, the three of you, for taking part out of your very, very busy day. I promise I'll push it to Q2 next year when it's not in the midst of tax season. So thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who attended and joined. And I hope everyone has a lovely rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.